it's also a book ultimately about learning, about how we embrace remarkable, great, wondrous learning as parents, as teachers, in all of the places where kids learn.
Yeah, I think that word how is so important. You know, all of us remember Mr. Rogers as a nice guy in a sweater, which he absolutely was. This is a book about how he became that. How did he make us feel that way? And how is he still relevant here in 2021?
You describe him as a learning scientist. What do you mean by that? What is a learning scientist to you?
A lot of people don't know that everything Fred Rogers did in the neighborhood was grounded in science. In many cases, it was grounded in science that was years, sometimes decades ahead of his time. Everything you saw had an intention behind it. So the costumes that characters wore in the neighborhood of make-believe were designed to nurture students' curiosity, viewers' curiosity. The lyrics he used in his songs were all grounded in the science of making kids feel good about themselves.
Learning science, simply put, is nothing more than what we're learning about learning itself.
If you talk to people who know the most about how humans learn, if you talk to some of the top scientists, if you read some of the latest research papers, they're talking less about things that can be measured. They're talking less about data than they are about making sure kids feel safe, making sure kids feel loved and capable of loving, making sure they feel like they belong to a community that cares about them. If you read these papers, they sound less like scientific research papers and more like a script from the neighborhood.
This whole child plus learning science equals the Fred method.
Do you have a favorite episode or a favorite song of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
You know, my favorite times were those field trips where you'd go see a construction site or a fire hall or things that, as a 5, 6, 7-year-old, I knew were out in the world, but I'd never been to. And Mr. Rogers took us to places. And I was probably about 7 years old when he took us to a crayon factory. Which is an episode that I think so many of us remember. And I think we remember it because crayons are such a ubiquitous tool for kids, right? And then suddenly seeing like, oh my gosh, how is this thing made? And that's how it's made. So I would say the crayon factory ranks highly on my list.
The episode Death of a Goldfish, when his fish passed away, is, to me, I think it's one of the most moving pieces of television I've ever seen. And it's also a masterclass in how to communicate with kids about hard things. He did it in ways that didn't deny the hard realities of the world.
Was there anything that really stood out to you, a favorite story or something that is so impactful that it's going to change the projection of education or parenting for you in the future?
Having gotten an opportunity to do this work and continuously absorb it, the lessons came home. And I'm not a perfect parent, Ryan's not a perfect teacher, and I think we're both learning personally in this work as we move forward in our own lives.
Every moment mattered, every small moment mattered, no matter how fleeting it might have seemed. And I do hope that if people get anything out of this book, it's to know that every moment matters, and that, you never know how your interactions with a child or with a grown adult are going to impact that person that day, 6 months down the road, or even years later.
Well, first of all, we have gratitude for all of the educators in and out of school, early childhood through post-secondary, and the work that they have done over these past nearly 2 years at this point, bringing our kids through these times and how critically important they are and they've been. We're hopeful that caring adults everywhere might find fueling for what's ahead in this book, because it does ideally take you to a place that's rooted and grounded in love, but then in those Fred Rogers blueprints offers something so accessible and so important about what's ahead and what we can do to support our kids in the years to come.
Full of perspectives and real-world advice from teachers and leaders, When You Wonder Your Learning explores how the blueprints of Mr. Rogers' teachings directly correlates to today and embraces the whole child. Find more information at whenyouwonder.org and get access to free whole child education resources at everfi.com/new teacher.